Hey guys, Jay Anthony and welcome back to the channel and to another watch review that is long overdue. It's kind of embarrassing that I've never had a true Moonwatch on the channel. It's something I've been planning for a long time. My grandfather actually has an original one from the late 60s, I believe, or maybe even 1970. And I never gotten around to shooting it, and it's honestly one of my favorite watches of all time. And it's pretty embarrassing. 13 years later, this is the first time I'm going to show you one on the channel. So if you got to see my review on the Hulk, this watch also belongs to that same gentleman, Terrence, who has a really nice collection, and he's really a true enthusiast. You know, and this is one of those watches that it's obviously very iconic, but it's also highly respected. As you can be an icon, but not all icons are really worth the praise they get. But this watch truly is special. You know, I look at this watch now, and we're going back over half a century when this thing first came out. And yet to me, nothing about it looks dated, and it's just one of those beautiful designs. Like people talk about Gerald Genta, this to me is another one of those watches that just does not age. And of course, those of you that have heard, this is the Moonwatch. This means this was worn in July of 1969 as, you know, of course, the first steps were taken on the moon. And I know a lot of people that don't really know that story are always really puzzled to find out that these watches are actually manual wind. And so we can actually see the beautiful gear train in here. I believe this is actually the 1863 movement, because it's the more highly decorated version. The less decorated version, the 1861, I believe, is usually under the solid case specs. But I know a lot of people ask with modern luxury watches, why would they have a modern luxury watch like this that is manual wind and not automatic rotor? And that actually ties back to, of course, the history of this watch. If you think about it, this watch was worn on the moon. And as most of you know, the moon is not exactly a high gravity environment. And so a automatic rotor would be very inefficient in a low gravity situation. So we needed a way that a watch could maintain power reserve, you know, a non-earth type setting. So it is manual wind, and actually it's based on a Lamania caliber, the Lamania 1873 caliber, which those of you in the know actually would recognize is kind of a great grandfather of a lot of modern watches. And believe it or not, even Patek Philippe have used this caliber. Their perpetual calendars up until I believe about 10 years ago actually used the same base caliber. But again, as I mentioned, this watch was first worn on the moon. When it first came out, it was actually a 321 caliber, and then they went to the 861, which was with them, I believe, until about the mid-1990s when it went to a rhodium plated version, which is what this caliber is currently based off of. Again, there's, I believe, the 1861 and the 1863, which is the better decorated version. It's a beautiful, beautiful movement. It's got a lot of history. If you guys are history files, this movement is up there with the 7750 in terms of extreme importance in the watch community. Basic specs, you know, as I mentioned, it's a manual wind movement. It's an older caliber, so beats rate, it's only about 21,000. I believe it's about 21.6, and the joules are about 18. So it's good for about a 48-hour power reserve. You know, as you guys know, most modern Omegas are chronometer spec, as Rolexes are. This one isn't, given its vintage nature. I believe these are good to about plus 11 seconds a day, and mine is probably an equivalent, which is, I think, extremely respectable, especially when you think about the fact that this is just a bunch of gears and grease kicking away. The fact that you can get that kind of precision is just incredible. Again, this is just one of those watches to me that never ages, and it's extremely functional. So of course you got a great tachometer bezel, but it also of course is a chronograph. So you have seconds over at 9, very similar to what you would see on a Valjoux based caliber, or like with Panerai, for example. But you have a nice 30-minute totalizer at 3, and you have a 12-hour counter down here at 6 o'clock. And it functions traditionally as you would expect. So the first chronograph pusher at the top, you can use to start it, and then stop, and then the bottom pusher resets it. Very similar to most modern day chronographs. And even though it's a lower beat rate, because the subdials are smaller, you don't really get the sense that it's a slow movement. And I think with vintage pieces too, I think lower beat rates actually add to a charm. I think it really ties to the watch. The other thing that's nice is I have a lot of experience with the original version of this watch, and while the essence hasn't changed and the dial and the bezel look very similar, as are the movement, they've made a lot of improvements to the rest of it. Like the bracelet on this modern version with the alternating brushed and polished, the really nice fold over Omega marked clasp that you have here that closes very securely, you know, the see-through sapphire back. These are all significantly nicer than the original versions used to be. If you ever get a chance to hold an original one, the bracelet's very thin and very flimsy. The case back is very generic stamped. they definitely have a vintage feel, and I really think that Omega has been very respectful in the way they've actually updated this watch, because again, it keeps all the essence of the original, but it makes it better, it improves it. And you can of course get this with both acrylic and sapphire crystal, so depending on your usage, you can have it quite authentic, or you can go with sapphire, and if you bang it into a wall, you're not going to have a stroke. It's also a great size. These are roughly 42 millimeters, but I don't even think they wear that big. I think they wear pretty similar to a 40 millimeter, which means regardless of your stature, I think just about anybody could wear that. And to kind of give you a sense of how timeless they are, I'm wearing my vintage Navitimer at the moment, which is similar style, and this just looks so over-styled if you compare to just how minimalist and classy that this Omega is, which is within a decade of the same watch. They both have similar functionality, but this, because it's such an elegant tool, it's just one of those things that I just think is always going to be in style. It's got a nice slim profile thanks to the mechanical caliber, and as usual, it's got an Omega marked crown. It's just a really, really nice watch, and I think this is something that, regardless of someone's level of collecting, if they saw this, there's always going to be a respect for it, because it's just a huge piece of watch history, and it's always going to be a decent investment too. So I apologize it's taken me so long to finally show you this on the channel, but this is one of those watches that really does live up to the hype. And I also have to say too, I love kind of the flat black color of the dial. In a lot of days, a lot of these modern dials are very glossy and they're very pretty, but I love the kind of the vintage aesthetic of that flat color on the dial, and just the way the light captures it. Like, it just has a very vintage instrument feel to it, and I don't know, it's like a real engineer's watch. It's a real tool watch, and it's just really cool. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I think if you're looking at one of these, I don't think you'd be disappointed at all. Again, they've enhanced the bracelets and stuff from the vintage ones. They got nice scrut links now. Good bracelet clasp. So it has the modern features you would expect, but it's lost none of that vintage charm, and it's so thin profile, it's extremely wearable. So I would highly recommend, if you have any interest, checking one of these things out. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. Please give me a thumbs up down below if you did, and let me know in the comment section what you think about the Speedmaster. Like I said, I think this is definitely a watch that really lives up to the hype. And thanks again to my friend Terrence who let me come over and check it out today. I really appreciate it as well. So thank you very much for tuning in, guys, and I'll catch you guys soon on the next video.